Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we are continuing our reading of the book, The #1 Ladies Detective Agency. This book here. As you already know, I'm using this project to practice my English and in a more natural and pressure-free way. So, in this video, I'm going to read the entire chapter 2. The video may be a little long because probably I'll stop them sometimes to understand some words or searching something in a Google, searching some place on a Google Earth, and really try to immerse myself in a book while improving my English. If you are fluent in English, feel free to tell me what I improve or correct my pronunciation. I appreciate it. If you are, if you are also learning English like me, just know that we are on the same journey. The goal here is not to be perfect, but to improve little by little and enjoy this process together. In chapter 1, we met Precious remotely, the main character of the story. She is very observant, intelligent, kind woman and who decides to open the first female detective agency in Botswana. The chapter also showed about her personality, personality, the way she sees people, and the strong connection she has the place where she lives. We also learned a little about her past and her father, who played an important role in her life. And from the beginning, we can already see that this book is not only about investigation because it is detective agency, but also about people, future, feelings, and reflections about life. So now, let's go to chapter 2. Before beginning the reading, I'm warning you that I sometimes highlight some words that I don't know and some because after I write these words in a notebook to train my vocabulary, and sometimes I search in a Google how to how pronunciation, and we are searching some place mentioned on a book in a Google Earth. Okay, so patient. Let it go. All those years ago, we don't forget about MMA remotely. Our heads may be small, but they are as full of memories as the sky may sometimes be full of swarming bees. Thousands and thousands of memories, of smells, of places, of little things that happen to us and which come back unexpectedly to remind us who we are. And who am I? I'm a precious remotely citizen of Botswana, Dodger of Obed remotely, who died because he had been a miner and could no longer breathe. His life was unrecorded. Who is, who is there to write down the lives of ordinary people? I'm Obed remotely, and I was born near Mahalapi in 1930. Mahalapi is halfway between Gaborone and Francistown, on the road that seems to go on and on forever. It was dirt road in those days, of course, and the railway line was much more important. The track come down from Bahalawi, crossed into Botswana at a plum tree. I highlight this. And then headed south down the side of the country all the way to Mafeking on the other side. These words I don't know how to pronounce, and I highlight them. Okay. In this paragraph, we see Gaborone, Gaborone and Francistown. This is a cities, and the Mahalapi is between them. Okay, so in Mahalapi, Mahalapi, Mahalapi is a city of Botswana, and the open the maps. Mahalapi is here. Botswana is here. Gaborone is here, and the Francistown is here. Mahalapi is between Francistown and Gaborone. These cities in Botswana, these cities in Africa. Okay, I live here in Brazil, and the story of the book is in Africa, in Botswana. Okay, very good. As a boy, I used to watch the trains as they drew up at the siding. They let out great clouds of steam, and we would dare one another to run as close as we could to it. The stokers would shoot us, and the station master would blow his whistle, but they never managed to get rid of us. We hid behind plants and boxes and dashed out to ask for coins from the closed windows of the train. We saw the white people look out of their windows like ghosts, and sometimes they would toss us one of their Rhodesian pennies, large copper coins with a hole in the middle, or, if you are lucky, a tiny silver coin, we call it a tiki, which could buy us a small tin of syrup. Syrup. I have difficulty to pronunciate syrup. This
syrup,
syrup. Syrup.
syrup,
Small tin of syrup. Okay, there you go. Mahalapi was a struggling village of huts made of bronze. Struggling village. I don't know how this, and I highlight this. So I copy on a Google Translate and the word pronunciation. Mm.
a straggling village,
A struggling village. A
a
struggling
straggling
village.
village, a
A
straggling
struggling village.
village,
All these pairs. Okay. The huts made of brown, sun-baked mud bricks and a few tin-roofed buildings. These belonged to government or the railways, and they seemed to us represent distant, untable luxury. Untable luxury. There was a school run by an old Anglican priest and a white woman whose face had been half destroyed by the sun. They both spoke Setswana, which was unusual, but they thought us English insistent on the pain of thrashing that we left our language outside in the playing ground. On the other side of the road was the beginning of the plain that stretched out into the Kalahari. Kalahari. It was featureless land, flooded with low thorny trees and the branches of tree orchid, the hornbills and the fletcher molopus. 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 I don't know how this. Okay. Molopus. I with their long trailing tail feathers. What is this? Na-na-na.
Fluttering malopes.
Fluttering molopes.
Fluttering
Fluttering molopes.
malopes. Fluttering
Fluttering molopes.
malopes.
Okay. It was a word that seemed to have no end, and that I think is what made Africa in those days so different. There was no end to it. A man could walk or ride forever, and who could never get anywhere. I'm 60 now, and I don't not think God wants me to live much longer. Perhaps there will be a few years more, but I doubt it. I saw Dr. Moffat at the Dutch Reformed Hospital in Moshud, who listened to my chest. He could tell that I had been a minor just by listen. And she shook his head and said that the minds have many different ways of hurting a man. As he spoke, I remembered a song which the Sorrow miners used to sing. They sang. I don't know sing, so I read the music. The mines eat men. Even you have left them, the mines may still been with you, eating you. We all knew this was true. You could be killed by falling rock, or you could be killed years later. When going underground was just a memory, or even a bad dream that I visited you at night, the mines would come back for their payment, just as they were come back for me now. So I was not surprised by Dr. Moffat said. Some people cannot bear news like that. They think they must live forever, and they cry and wail when they realize that their time is coming. I don't know feel that. I did not weep at that news which the doctor gave me. The only thing that makes me sad is that I shall be leaving Africa when I die. I love Africa, which is mother and my father. When I am dead, I shall miss the smell of Africa because they say that where you go, wherever they may be, there is no smell and no taste. I'm not saying that I'm a brave man. I'm not. But I really don't seem to mind this news I have been given. I can look back over my 60 years and I think of everything that I have seen of how I started with nothing and ended up with almost 200 castles. And I have a good daughter, a loyal daughter, who looks after me well and makes me tea while I sit here in the sun and uh, look out to the hills in the distance. When you see the hills from the distance, they are blue, as all the distance in the country are. We are far from the sea here, with Angola and Namibia between us and the coast, and yet we have this great empty ocean blue above us and around us. No sailor could be no lonelier than a man and a man standing in the middle of our land, with the miles and miles of blue about him. I highlighted this word because I don't know how to pronounce it. So, vamos lá.
lonelier,
Lonelier, lonelier,
lonelier, lonelier,
lonelier. Okay, lonelier. It's weird. It's green. Verde em português. Angola and Namibia, it's places. Okay. I have never seen the sea, although a man I worked with the mines once invited me to his place down in Zululand. He told me that it had green hills that reached down to the Indian Ocean and that he could look out of doorway and the sea ships in the distance. He said that the woman in his village brewed, brewed the best beer in the country and that a man could sit in the sun there for many years and never anything except make his children and drink maize beer. I highlighted this word, brewed. He, he said if you went with him, he might be able to get me a wife, and that they might overlook the fact that I was not a Zulu if I prepared to pay the father enough money for the girl. Okay, it's enfim. But why should I would to go to Zululand? Why should I ever want anything but to live in Botswana and to marry a Tswanga girl? I said to him that Zululand sounded fine, but that every man has a map in the heart of his own country, oh, and that the hurt will never allow you to forget this map. I told him that in Botswana we did not have Grimm's hills, green hills that he had in his place nor the sea, but we had the Kalahari and and land that stretched further than one could imagine. I told him that if a man is born in a dry place, then although we may dream of rain, he doesn't want too much, and that we will not mind the sun that beats down and down. So I never went with him to Zululand and never saw the sea, ever. But that has not made me unhappy, not once. Mm. So I sit here now, it's near the end, and think of everything that was happened to me. Not a day passes, though, that reminded us not to God and to thoughts of what it would be like to die. I am not frightened, fright, frightened, no, I don't know. Okay, okay. What I will be like to die. I am not frightened of this because I don't know mind pain, and the pain that I feel is really quite bearable. They gave me pills large with ones they told me to take this if the pain in my chest became too great. But these pills make me sleep, and I prefer to be awake. So I think of God and wonder that He will say to me when I stand before Him. I don't know what this word. Okay, again. Let it go.
frightened,
Frightened, frightened,
frightened, frightened,
frightened, frightened,
frightened, frightened,
frightened, frightened, frightened.
frightened,
Okay, frightened, frightened,
bearable,
bearable, bearable,
bearable, bearable,
bearable, bearable.
bearable.
Okay, bearable if frightened. Some people think of God as a white man, which is an idea which the missionaries brought with them all those years ago and which seems to have stuck in people's mind. I do not think this is so, because there is no difference between white man and a black man. We are all the same. We are just people, and God was here anyway before the missionaries came. We called him by a different name then, and he did not live over at the Jews' place. He lived here in Africa, in the rocks, in the skies, in places where we knew he liked it to be. When you died, you went somewhere else, and God would have been there too, but you would not be able to get spatially close to him. Why should we want that? Okay. Sometimes I highlight phrases to like this and they go to Google Translate or listen entire.
When you died, you went somewhere else.
When you
When you
died,
died, you
we
went
went somewhere
somewhere
else.
else.
Somewhere else. Make join these words.
When you
When you
died,
died,
you went somewhere else.
you went somewhere else.
When
When
you
you died,
died, you
we
went
went
somewhere
somewhere else.
else.
When
When you
when I
died,
die, I
you went
went
somewhere
somewhere
else.
else. Okay. Sometimes I do this because I have an impression that I speaking wrong, and I speak, but I don't want to speak wrong. Okay. So the Google Translate is my partner. We have a story in Botswana about two children, a brother and sister, who are taken up to heaven by a whirlwind and find them heaven is full of beautiful white castle. That is how I like to think of it. And I hope that is true. I hope that when I die, I find myself in a place where there are castles like that who have sweet breath, and all who are all about me. If that is what awaits me, then I am happy to go tomorrow, or even now, right at this moment. I should like to say goodbye to Precious, doll, thought, and to hold my daughter's hand as I went. That would be a happy way to go. I love our country, and I'm proud to be a Botswana. There's no other country in Africa that can hold its heads up as we can. I think it's Botswana, no Botswana. I don't know. After I see in the book, in a physical book, we have no political prisoners and never have had any. We have democracy, and they have been careful. The Bank of Botswana is full of money from our diamonds, and we owe nothing. But things were bad in the past. Before we built our country, we had to go off to South Africa to work. Went to Malawi, all all those countries. The mines sucked our men in mines, just as people did from Lesotho and Mozambique, and they left the old men and the children at home. We dug for gold and diamonds, and they made those those white men rich. Then built their big house with their walls and their cars, and we dug down below them and brought out of the rock on which they built it all. I went to the mines when I was 18. We were the land proctor, and I don't know, like, pronounce it. We were the someplace there, and the British ran our country to protect us from the Boers, or that is what they said. There was a commissioner down in Mafeking of the border in South America, and we would come up the road and speak to the chiefs. We would say, you do these things, you do that thing. And the chiefs all obeyed him because they knew that if they did not, we would have them deposit, but some of them were clever. And while the British said, "You do this," they would say, "Yes, yes, sir, I'll do that." And all the time, behind their back, they did the other thing or they just pretended to do something. So for many years, nothing at all happened. There was a good system of a government because most people want nothing to happen. That is the problem with government these days. They want to do things all the time. They are always very busy thinking of what the things they can do next. That is not what people want. People want to be left alone to look after their castle. And, okay, so we had left Mahalapi by then and gone to live in Moshood, where my mother's people lived. I liked the Moshood and they would have been happy to stay here there. But my father said I should go to the mines, as his lands were not good enough to support me and my wife. And we did not have money castle, and we grew just enough to crops to keep us through the year. So when the recruiting truck came from over the border, I went to them and they put me on a scale and listened to my chest and they made me run up and down a ladder for 10 minutes. Then a man said that I would be a good miner and they made me write my name on a piece of paper. They asked me the name of my chief and I asked me whether I have ever been in trouble with the police. That was all. I went off on the truck the next day. I had one truck, which my father had bought for me at the Indian store. I only had one of pair of shoes, but I have a spare shirt and some spare trousers. These were all the things I had, apart from some biltong which my mother had made for me. I loaded my top of the truck, trunk on top of the truck, and then all the families who had come say to goodbye. I started to sing. The woman cried, and we waved the goodbye. Young men always try not to cry or look sad, but I knew that within us our hearts were cold. Oh, opa. It took 12 hours to reach Johannesburg, as the roads were wood in those days, and if the truck went too fast, it could break and axle. We traveled through the Western Transvaal, through the heat, up the truck little castle. Every hour the driver would stop and come around to the back and pass sorry and pass out canteens of water which they filled at each town we went through. We were allowed the canteen for a few seconds only, and in that time you had to take as much water as you could. Men who were on their second or third contract knew all about this, and they had bottles of water each they would share if you were desperate. We were all Botswana together, and a man would do not see fellow Botswana suffer. The older men were about the younger ones. They told them that now that they had signed on for the mines, they were no longer boys. They told us that we would see things in Johannesburg which we could never have imagined existing, stupid, or if we did not work on that, if we are weak or hard enough, our life from now would be nothing but suffering. They told us that we would see cruelty and weakness, but that if we stuck with other Botswana and did what we were told by the older men, we would survive. I thought that perhaps they were exaggerating. I remembered that the older boys telling us about the initiation school that we all had to go to once warming us obviously ahead of us. They said all this to frighten us, and the reality was quite different. But these men spoke the absolute truth. What lay ahead of us was exactly what they had predicted, and even worse. In Johannesburg, they spent 2 weeks training us. We were all kite, fit and strong, but nobody could be sent down the mines until he had been made even stronger. So they took us to a building which they have heated with steam, and they made us jump up and down and to bench for four for 4 hours. This is because for 4 hours each day. This was too much for some men who collapsed and had to be hauled back to their feet. But somehow I survived. It passed on the back pass on the next part of our training. They told us we would be taken down into the mines and about the work we would be expected to do. They talked us they talked to us about safety and how the rock could fall and crush us if we were careless. They carried in a man with no down on a table and made us listen to him as he told us what the legs and put him what happened to him. They thought as Funigalo, Funigalo, uma coisa assim, which is it's a language. Funigalo. They thought us Funigalo, which is the language used for giving orders underground. It is a strange language. The Zulus laugh when they hear it because there are so many Zulu words in, but it's not Zulu. It's a language good for telling people what to do. There are many words to push, take, shove, carry, load, and no words for love or happiness or the sounds which birds make in the morning. Then we went down to the shafts and they were shown what to do. They put us in cages beneath great hills, and these cages shot down as fast as walks falling upper they their prey. They had the trains down there, small trains, and they put us on these, took us to the end of long, dark tunnels, which were filled with green rock and dust. My job is load the rock after it had been blasted, and did this for 7 hours a day. I grew strong, but all the time there was dust, dust, dust. Mm, Some of the mines were more dangerous than others, and we all knew which these were. In a safe mine, you hardly ever see the stretchers underground. In a dangerous one, thought, the stretchers are often out, and you see men being carried up the cages, crying with pain, or worse still, silent under the heavy red blankets. We all knew that the only way to survive was to get into a cruel war where the men had what everybody called the rock sense. This was something which every good miner had. He had to be able to see what the rock was doing, what is it was feeling, and to know when new supports were needed. If one or two men in a crew did not know this, then it did not matter how good the others were. The rock would come down and it fell on good miners and bad. There was another thing which affected your chances of survival, and this was the sort of white miner and you had. The white miners were put in charge of teams, but many of them had very little to do. If a team was good, then the boss boy knew exactly what to do and how to do it. The white miner would pretend to give the others, but he knew that it would be the boss boy who really got the work done. But a stupid white miner, and there were plenty of those who would drive his team too hard. We would shout and hit the man if he had thought they were not working quickly enough, and his could be very dangerous. Yet, yet when the rock came down, the white miner would never be there. We would be back down the tunnel with the other white miners, waiting for us to report that the work had been finished. It was not used for a white miner to beat his men if he got in the temper. They were not meant to, but the shifty bosses always turned a blind eye and let them get on with it. Yet we were never allowed to hit back, no matter how undeserved the blows. If you hit a white miner, you were finished. The mining policy would be the mining policy would be waiting for you at the top of the shaft, and you could spend a year or two in prison. They kept us they kept us apart because that is how they worked. These white men. The souls we were all in one gang, and the Zulus in another, and the Malawis in another, and so on. Everybody was white his people, and high, and they had to obey the boss boy. If you didn't, and the boss boy said that a man was making trouble, they would send him home or arrange for the police to beat him until he started to be reasonable again. We were all afraid of the Zulus, although I had that friend who was a kind Zulu. The Zulus thought they were better than any of us, and sometimes they called us women. If their fight, it was almost always the Zulus or the Bazoto, but never the Batswana. We did not like fighting. Once a drunk Motswana wandered into a Zulu hostel by mistake on a, s- on a, s- on a was a Saturday night. They beat him with some books, some books. I don't know how it is. And left him lying on the road to be run over. Fortunately, a police van saw him and rescued him, or he would have been killed, all for wandered into the wrong hostel. I worked for years in those mines, and I saved all my money. Other men spent it women and drinking and on fancy clothes. I bought nothing, not even a gramophone. I sent the money home to the Standard Bank, and then I bought castle with it. Each year I bought a few cows and gave them to my cousin to look after. Then they had calves, and slowly my herd got bigger. I would have stayed on the mines, I suppose. I had I not witnessed a terrible thing. It happened after I had been there for 15 years. I had them been given a much better job as an assistant to a blaster. They would to give a blasting tickets, and as there was a job that the white men kept for themselves. But I was given the job of carrying explosive for about last year, and helping him with the fuse. This was a good job. This was a good job, and I liked that the man I worked for. He had left something in a tunnel once his team can in which he carried his sandwiches, and he had asked me to fetch it. So I went. So I went. So I went up down the tunnel where he had been working and looked for this can. The tunnel was light, lit by bulbs, which were attached, attached to the roof all the way along. So it was quite safe to walk along it. But you still had to be careful because here and there were great galleries which had been blasted out of the rock. These could be 200 feet deep, and they opened out from the sides of the tunnel, dropped down to another working level, like the underground quarries. Men fell into these galleries from time to time, and it was away their fault. They were not looking where they were walking, or were walking along an unlit tunnel when the batteries, bat- batteries in the helmet lights were weak. Sometimes I Sometimes a man just walked over the edge for no reason at all, or because was unhappy and did not want to live anymore. You could never tell. There are many sadness in the hearts of men who are far away from their countries. I turned a corner in the tunnel and found myself in a round chamber. There was a turned corner in this tunnel and found myself in a gallery at the end of this. And there was warming sign. Four men were standing at the edge of this, and they were holding another man by his arms and legs. As I came around the corner, they lifted him and threw him forwards over the edge and the dark into the dark. The man screamed in Xhosa and heard he said. He said something about a child, but I did not catch it all as I am not very good at Xhosa. Then he was gone. I stood where I was. The man had not seen me yet, but not turned around and shouted out in Zulu. Then they began to run towards me. I turned around and ran back along the tunnel. I knew that if they caught me, I would follow their victim into the gallery. It was not a race, and I could let myself loose. Although I got away, I knew that those men had seen me and that I would be killed. I had seen their murder and could be a witness, testemunha is witness. And so I knew that I could not stay in the mines. I spoke to the blaster. He was a good man and he listened to me carefully when I told him that I would have to go. There wasn't no other white man I could have spoken to like that, but he understood. Still, he tried to persuade me to go to the police. Tell them what you say, he said in Afrikaans. Tell them they can't catch these Zulus and hang them, hang them. I don't know who these men are. They all catch me first, and I'm going home to my place. He looked at me and nodded. Then he took my hand and shook it, which is the first time a white man had done that to me. So I called him my brother, which is the first time I had done that to a white man. You go back home to your wife, he said. If a man leaves his wife too long, she starts to make trouble for him. Leave me, go back and give her more children. So I left the mine secretly like a thief and came back to Botswana in 1960. I cannot tell you how full my heart was. I crossed the border back in Botswana and left South America behind me forever. In that place, I had felt every day that I might die. Danger and sorrow hung over Johannesburg like a cloud, and could never be happy there. In Botswana, it was different. There were no policemen with dogs. There were no Tutsis with knives waiting to rob you. You did not wake up every morning to wailing siren calling you down down into the hot earth. There were not the same great crowds of men, all from some distant place, all seeking from home, and waiting to be somewhere else. I had left a Parisian grate, brownie Parisian, under the sunlight. When I came home that time, I got off the bus at Moshudi and saw the Kochi, Kopje, I don't know how this word, and the chief's place and the goats. Aprender, learning, vamos lá.
Copy.
Copy. Copy.
Copy.
Copy. Okay. Again. When I came home at that time, I got off the bus of Moshudi and saw the copy and the chief's place and the goats. I just stood and cried. A man came up to me, a man I didn't know, and he put his hand on my shoulder and asked me whether I was just back from the mines. I I told him that I was, and he just nodded and left his hand there until I had stopped the weeping. Then he smiled and walked away. She had seen my wife coming for me, and he did not to interfere with the homecoming of a husband. I had taken this wife 3 years earlier, although we had seen very little of one another since the marriage. I came from Johannesburg once a year for 1 month, and this was all the life we had together. And after my last trip, she had became pregnant, and my little girl had been born while I was still away. Now I was to see her, and my wife had brought her to me to meet me off the bus. They stood there. She stood there with the child in her arms, the child who was more valuable to me than all the gold taken out of those mines in Johannesburg. This was my firstborn and my only child, my girl, my precious remote sweet. Rachel was like her mother, who was a good fat man. Good, fat man, good fat woman. She played in the yard outside the house and laughed when I picked her up. I had a cow that gave good milk, and I kept this nearby for Precious. We gave her plenty of syrup too, and the eggs every day. My wife put Vaseline on her skin and polished it so that she shone. They said she was the most beautiful child in Bechuanaland, and the woman would came from miles away to look at her and hold her. Then my wife, the mother of Precious, died. We were living just outside the Moshudi Dam, and she used to go from our place to visit an auntie of hers who lived over the railway line near the Francistown Road. She carried food there, as that auntie was too old to look after herself, and she only had on one son there, who was sick with Sufuban and could not walk very far. Okay, you see, I don't know what is this.
Sufuba.
Sufuba,
Sufuba.
Sufuba,
Sufuba.
Sufuba. Sei. I don't know how it happened. Some people said that it was because there was a storm brewing up. There was lightning that she may have run without looking where she was going. But she was on the railway line when the train from Bula, I don't know, I don't remember, from Bulawayo came down and hit her. The engine driver was very sorry, but he had not seen her at all, which was probably true. My cousin came to look after Precious. She made her clothes, took her to school, and cooked our meals. I was a sad man, and I thought, now there is nothing left for you in this life but Precious and your castle. In my sorrow, I went out to the castle post to see how my castle were and to pay the herd boys. I had more castle now, and I had even thought of buying a store, but I decided to wait and to let Precious buy a store once I was dead. Besides, the dust from the mines had ruined my chest, and I could not walk fast or lift things. One day I was on my way One day I was on my way back from the castle post, and I had reached the main road that led from Francistal to Gaborone. It was a hot day, and I was sitting under a tree by roadside roadside waiting for the bus that would go that way later on. I fell asleep from the heat, and I was woken by the sound of a car drawing up. It was a larger car, an American car, I think, and there was a man sitting in the back. The driver came up to me and spoke to me in Setswana. I thought the number plate of the car was from South America. The driver said that there was a leak in the radiator, and did I know where they might find some water? As it happened, there was castle watering tank along the track to my castle post, and so I went with the driver and we filled a can with water. water. When we came back to put the water in the radiator, the man who had been sitting in the back had go out and was standing looking at me. He smiled to show that he was grateful for my help, and he smiled back. Then I realized that I knew who this man was, and that is was the man who managed all those mines in Johannesburg, Opiner, Opiner, I don't know how this Johannesburg Oppenheimer's man. One of Mister, I went over the I went over to this man and told him who I was. That I was remotely who had worked in his mines, and I was sorry that I had to leave early, but that I had been because of circumstances beyond my control. He laughed and said that it was good of me to have worked in the mines for so many years. He said I could ride back in his in his car and that he would take me to Moshudi. So I arrived back in Moshudi in that car, and this important man came into my house. He saw Precious, and he told me that she was a very fine child. Then, after he had drunk some tea, he looked at his watch. I must go back now, he said. I have to get back to Johannesburg. I said that his wife would be angry if he was not back in time for the food she had cooked him. He said this would probably be so. He walked outside. He walked outside. Mr. Oppenheimer's man reached into his pocket and took out a wallet. I turned away while they opened it. I did not want money from him, but he insisted. He said I had been one of Mr. Oppenheimer's people, and Mr. Oppenheimer like the two after his people. He then gave it to me 200 hands, and I said that I would use it to buy a bull, since I had just lost once. He was pleased with this. I told him to go in peace, and he said that I should stay in peace. So we left one another, and I never saw my friend again, although he is always there in my heart. So it's finished the chapter 2. I appreciate it if you stand until final, the chapter 2. I think I read some other chapters. I don't know if all or some, but from each chapter, I I brought something. I brought no. I brought something to this channel, or I type in the chapter or read the chapter. Okay, I how I said I'm learning English, so your feedback is important to me. Okay, if you like this video, if you like this video, let your like in this video, and subscribe in the channel. Okay, until let's see let you bye em português agora. Se você gostou desse vídeo e acha que está servindo de inspiração ou de ajuda para a sua jornada no aprendizado de inglês, deixe seu like aqui também, se inscreva no canal. Como eu disse, eu não sei se eu vou ler o livro inteiro, mas sobre cada capítulo eu vou trazer alguma coisa, seja alguma dica ou a principal ideia. Mas a intenção é ler o livro inteiro como eu fiz hoje, tá? Então pode demorar um pouquinho, mas a intenção é essa. Então, se você gostou da ideia, deixe seu like. E se você tiver outra ideia para me ajudar, também eu aceito. E vamos seguir nessa jornada, porque é muito importante hoje a gente, a gente se comunicar em inglês, né? Principalmente se me comunicar, porque eu sei que no Brasil nós aprendemos muito a parte gramatical do inglês, mas a fala em si a gente é meio que bloqueado, né? A gente quase não fala. Então, que esse vídeo te inspire, né? Porque eu tô tentando me inspirar também. E, e que seja bom para todo mundo, ok? Até mais.